Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people think they're special and more deserving than others. And guys, in today's episode, a Karen finds out the hard way that she can't boss around random strangers because she doesn't own the town she lives in. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's super duper entitled stories. Hit subscribe if you haven't. And as always, the stories can be sent to this email right here. Alright, so I wanted to share a recent Karen encounter with you all. On this day, I was waiting in line at the grocery store to check out my items. I usually use self-checkout, but the lines were long everywhere, so I just went to a normal cashier line. So I'm waiting peacefully for my turn, minding my own business, probably thinking about dinner or something. There's only 2 people ahead of me in line. All of a sudden, I hear, "Hey, give me your bags." Hearing that, I furrow my brow for a moment and look over to see a woman standing to my right. I then look at her and just stare at her for a moment, and she points her finger at me and says, "You, give me your bags." I then look into my cart and notice my reusable grocery totes. I then look back at her confused, and the following dialogue ensues. I say, "Oh, don't worry, they have paper bags at the checkout." At that, Karen says, "I don't want to pay 5 cents a bag." To which I tell her, "Oh, maybe you should buy some reusable bags then. There's some over there for $1.99. I then gesture over to the reusable bag display. Karen then says, "I just said I don't want to pay 5 cents a bag. You expect me to pay $1.99? I had nothing to say to that, and she says, "I have reusable bags in my car." I say to her, "Nice, you can go back out and get them then." She says, "No, I can't walk outside then come back in. I can't leave my cart." At that, I offer to watch her cart while she goes and gets her bags, and Karen says, No one's watching my cart. Give me your bags." I tell her again, "You can't have my bags." At this point, she yells to the cashier and says, she won't give me her bags. The cashier shrugs and motions me forward. I proceed to check out, and the cashier grabs my bags from the cart and begins packing them. The whole time, Karen's standing behind me, seething in anger. The entire time the cashier is bagging my stuff, Karen proceeds to ridicule every single item I selected, and then commented on every single item and how it doesn't really require a bag. I then finish checking out, and begin walking out with my groceries that are conveniently in my bags. Karen then yells out to me, "Hey, can you bring your bags back in once you put your groceries in your car?" At this point, the man in line behind Karen yells back at her and says, "Buy your own damn bags." And you should have seen the look on her face. Here's an idea, Karen. Why don't you have the cashier scan the items, place the items back in the cart, wheel the cart to your car, and then unload the items? Like, I feel like that'd be so much easier and less embarrassing than to harass random customers for their bags, right? Okay, so I work at a very busy restaurant. And during our rush, we rarely have a table open for long. On this day, in our most popular section, someone recently broke a table. Now, I don't know what they did to it, but the 2 front legs caved in and the table fell forward with the 2 back legs still standing. So the table's at an incline. We were really busy. All the tables were taken except for the broken table, and that's when a family of 5 walks in, with 2 adults and 3 kids. The 2 youngest children were screaming at the top of their lungs about how they didn't want Italian or something. So I greet the mother, but before I could explain the wait, she cuts me off and specifically requested a table immediately. Now, of course, we didn't have any tables open, and none of the sitting tables were close to leaving. I then explained to her that it would be about 45 minutes to sit, and that's when she huffs and says, "What are you talking about? I clearly see a table right there." The woman, of course, points to the broken table. Now, I want to clarify here that the table had a huge sign saying it was broken and that you can't sit at it. We also moved the chairs away and wrapped caution tape around the leg. I thought it was pretty self-explanatory why she couldn't sit there, and I even thought she was joking around when she pointed. Judging by the fact that she was genuinely waiting for a response, I explained the table was broken and that it's dangerous to put her there. I told her she had to wait, and at this point, that's when she yells at me saying that she wasn't going to wait because why should she when there's clearly a table there? So after a couple of minutes of back and forth, she then asked for the manager. He told her that he's confident that I'm not exaggerating about the danger of a broken table. With that, she begrudgingly decided to wait. Mind you, her kids were screaming the entire time. At this point, I couldn't take it anymore, so I went to the bathroom to get away from them. When I returned, she was moving chairs and taking the caution tape down. I didn't feel like fighting it, so I let it happen. The entire time she sat, she glared at me. Whenever I walked by, she made comments about how the table seemed completely fine. She then told the server that I was incompetent and rude and how I shouldn't even be employed here. She even called my manager over to gloat about how I didn't know what I was talking about and how she expects a discount and a write-up for me. Now, I don't get paid enough to have some petty beef with a customer. It was out of my hands. The table was fine for the most part. That is, until her food comes out. The food goes on the table with no friction. The table did wobble a bit, but I'm sure they didn't notice. Once the plates hit the table, they began to attack their meal, and that's when it happened. The legs bent and the table falls over. I was watching as the food slid to the floor and dish after dish broke with barely touched pasta. Karen turns beet red, and as her server rushed over, she lets out a torrent of curse words. When the manager said she would still have to pay for the meal, she then lied. She told her I told her she could sit at the table. After multiple people shot that down, she said that based on what I told her, she thought the table had a wobble, not a broken leg. She said it was my fault for not being clear. She did pay for her bill though, and she left the restaurant in a fury. And she made sure to tell me that it was my fault on the way out. And even though I had to help clean up all the food, it was worth it. Guys, I'd love to say that Karen got a healthy dose of karma, but seriously, that's what happens when you ignore someone who tells you that the table is broken, but you still choose to sit at it. And I love how the manager refused to comp her meal. That was the cherry on top, guys. But I do have to say, the manager never should have allowed the family to be seated and served there, because that could have been a huge lawsuit waiting to happen, guys. And if she was a mega Karen, she might have had that place shut down real fast. A few weeks ago, I took my kiddo to swim lessons. My in-laws joined me because they love seeing my kiddo swim. So while watching kiddo, my mother-in-law noticed a man showering in the showers that are in the pool area. Now there is a curtain on the shower stall, but the shower's purpose is to be there to rinse off before going in the pool, not to shower naked in. My mother-in-law then notices the man opening the curtain and she could see everything. The man did this multiple times to grab some things in a backpack. At this, my father-in-law is full on what the F mode, and I'm sitting there like, kids are in the pool, they can see this man's ding-a-ling, which is not okay. There's crazy people in the area who would love to call the cops on this man. I'm thinking, does this man know that we can see everything, or that there's locker rooms available for showering in? So I wait until he's done, and when he's walking out, I casually go up to him and say, hey man, just a heads up. When you were getting things out of your bag, we could see your naked body. I tell him there's fancy locker rooms down the hall in the basement to shower naked, and there's kids here, and it's best to shower there next time. At that, the man just looked at me dumbfounded and he walks away, and I thought that was the end of it, and then enters the Karen. So this man thought that instead of addressing the situation when I brought it up, that he'd go get his wife. The man goes and gets his wife, and she comes over with a 4-year-old girl on her hip. And also the employee of the complex. They come up to me when I'm watching my kids swim, and the employee just lets this woman yell at me, and here's the conversation. Karen comes up to me and says, hey, do you work here? I say to her, no, it's pretty obvious that I'm watching my kid here swim. She then goes off on me and says, well, then who are you to tell my husband where to shower? You don't work here. My husband does not need to listen to you. Now I try to explain myself and say, well, I could see, and that's when she interrupts me and says, you don't work here. You don't get to tell my husband what to do. I tell her, ma'am, I could see his privates. So could have my child or anyone else here. Would you like it if... The woman again repeats herself and says, you don't work here. Don't tell him what to do. She then huffs and puffs away, and her husband stands behind her like a wimp. The employee talks to us, and I inform her what actually happened. She then talked to the parents, and they still use the showers in the pool area. But they put a chair in there with a curtain around it, so we don't see anything, but still. The locker rooms are an appropriate place to be naked. Use that. Yeah guys, so everybody in the comments is saying that OP should have called police because that man seems to have been doing it on purpose. But, guys, there's also people that exist who see a shower and think, oh, I can shower here. Why not? So you guys will have to give me your opinions on that. Also, OP said he got a good glimpse of the man's downstairs. Like, I wonder if OP saw the berries there as well, as it does seem that his Karen wife might have taken them. Like, my goodness, getting your wife to come scream at a random stranger? Shame on you, sir. So this story happened a few years ago, and I thought I'd share my crazy encounter with a wild Karen. She was truly wild, as she came and went in the blink of an eye, and I never did see her again. Anyways, some background. At the time, I lived in a smallish city of about 10,000 people, where everybody pretty much knows everyone and their business. I'm a disabled army veteran who gets meals on wheels. I use a heavy-duty cane to get around due to service-connected disabilities. I have severe PTSD, social anxiety disorder, and depression. I don't deal well with confrontation either. A little more about me is that I'm really into nature. I love watching birds and squirrels. So on this day, I'm outside of my front yard, filling the squirrel and bird feeder with peanuts and sunflower seeds. I've already filled up the bird feeders, and they're hanging from their hooks. I want to let you know that my feeders are well within my property lines and about 10 feet from the house, so far away from the street or sidewalk. All of a sudden, I hear, "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I stammer out a, "Huh?" Now, I had never met this woman before, and like I said, it's a small town where everyone's familiar with one another, and I've never seen her face. The Karen then screams and says, "You can't put out bird feeders in the city." Now, I've lived in this house for over 20 years, so I know it wasn't true, especially on my own property. I tried to explain to her, but Karen wasn't having any of it. I told her the bird feeders were on my property and that I'm not going to be removing them. I try to laugh it off, as it's such an absurd demand. And that's when Karen screams, "No, you need to take them down right now or I'm calling the police." And then Karen did a really stupid move. She comes onto my property and she tries to aggressively take my bird feeders. Of course, when I saw her getting aggressive, I go out of my way to block her, and that's when she shoved me, and I fell hard to the ground. She then starts pulling at my bird feeders, and it was at that point I swung my cane and hit her hard. Now, of course, as soon as I hit her, she screams like I just broke her leg, and she screams that I'm going to jail. I yell back at her, "You're trespassing, and you pushed me," to which she keeps screaming, "I'm going to call the police." Now, what Karen didn't know was that across the street from me lived an officer, who we'll call Ted. I don't know what he was doing at the time, but he happened to hear the commotion and he saw the whole thing. He was off duty at the time, and he walks over to us, and that's when the woman starts screaming, You saw that. She assaulted me. She's got bird feeders, which aren't allowed." Ted comes over to me and asks me how I'm doing, and asks if I need an ambulance to go to the hospital. I tell him, no, I fell really hard, but I'm okay. And I guess he also radioed police or something in that time, because within 5 minutes of him showing up, a police car comes around, and the officer gets out and puts the woman in handcuffs. The whole time she's screaming, "Why am I being arrested?" That's when Ted tells her, "For trespassing and assault, I saw it with my own eyes. You walked onto her property and you knocked her over." Hearing that, Karen looks at the other officer and says, "What the heck do you know? He's lying, officer. These two are trying to get me arrested for no reason." And that's when Ted tells her, "I am an officer. I saw you go on this woman's property and shove her." Karen tells him, "If you saw that, then you'll see she hit me with her cane." Ted tells her that I acted in self-defense and she shouldn't have been on my property anyways. That's when I told him I have security cameras and they'll have footage as well. The officer then nodded. He then asked me if I was sure that I didn't need to go to the hospital or anything, and I told him I was fine. And Karen, I had no idea where she went after that. She got into the police car and I never did see that woman again. Guys, the whole time I'm reading this post, I'm thinking, what the heck does that woman have against bird feeders? Like, all I can say is it definitely wasn't worth that drama and a ride in the cop car that day for whatever reason. Okay, so the other day, I overslept for work. It was completely my fault. I'd stayed up too late binging a series and I slept through my alarm. I had woken up 30 minutes later than I should have. There's almost no worse feeling than realizing that you've overslept, so I woke up in a panic. I immediately called my boss to let him know that I was running late and then began a frantic effort to get ready for work as quickly as possible. Now, my wife doesn't always remember when I have to be at work since my starting time varies by a few hours. So she didn't necessarily know that I was running late until I called up to her and told her. As I was about to jump in the shower, I yelled up to her and asked, "Hey hun, I'm running late. I really need you to quickly throw a lunch together for me. Just a sandwich and some fruit and chips and a couple of bottles of pop." My wife then calls down, "No." And I yelled back up, "Please, just this once, help me out." Now here's the thing, my wife has some weird hang-up about packing lunches for me. She grew up in a family where her father always expected her mother to pack his lunch for him, and according to her, he was kind of entitled about it. So while my wife doesn't mind cooking dinner for me or doing my laundry, not that I always expect it, she just has a problem with packing lunch for me, as it makes her feel too much of a servant. Now I don't totally get it, but it's her thing. And it's never been a big deal before the other day, I just always pack my own lunch. However, even asking this one time, when I came upstairs, I found that my lunch cooler was empty. I then look over at my wife, who's sitting on the couch on her phone, and said, "Really? Were you too busy?" My wife then answered, "Pack your own lunch. It's not my job." Now my wife only works part-time, and it absolutely beyond pissed me off to watch her sitting there, leisurely scrolling through her phone while she knew that I was stressed and scrambling. I just left without a lunch, and I had to buy food from the vending machine to get me through the day. When I got home, I was still pissed, and we got into a huge fight. She told me that I knew her boundary about packing a lunch for me. I told her she could have put her hang-up aside that one time to help me out. So am I the entitled a-hole in this situation? Yeah, so I'm just gonna say that everybody sucks here, but the wife was acting more of an entitled a-hole than OP was for sure. Like yes, on one hand, maybe OP should have respected her boundaries, and, it was his fault for staying up late and he should have made his lunch the night before, yada yada yada. But guys, marriage should be a partnership and it's all about helping one another. And this definitely was a situation where some help would have been nice. So a little bit of context. I'm on holidays in a small town that's known to be popular with those living an alternative lifestyle, and hippies. It's not really my jam, but the town's lovely and it's close to all the beautiful hikes in the area that I came to do. So I'm at a cafe that's absolutely packed, as it's a public holiday. It's one of the few businesses open in the small town, and there's one table unoccupied, but it's been reserved. So I've been sitting at the bar-like seats designated for single diners near the window. I then head to the counter to pay, and I wait in line behind a family. It's a mom, dad, 2 kids, and you can tell from the way they're dressed that they're tourists passing through. I then hear the mom start yelling at the cashier, and I tune in. The woman saying, "What do you mean there's no free tables?" The cashier says, "I'm sorry ma'am, we can get quite busy on public holidays, but you're welcome to give me your name and number and I can reserve the next open table." The woman then looks around the cafe and she spots the reserved table. She then says, "Well, what about that one? That one's free, it's empty." The cashier tells her, unfortunately, that's been reserved. The dad is obviously over it, and he tugs on his wife's arm and he says, "We'll just find somewhere else." To which the woman says, "No, there's a free table." The woman then storms to the reserved table and she sits down. She then says, "We'll eat here, thank you. Just give these people the next table when they come." The cashier then pokes her head into the kitchen and out comes the owner. The owner comes over and says, "Ma'am, I'm the owner. Unfortunately, you can't sit here. I've personally had this table reserved for 2 weeks." The Karen says, "We will eat here. Then when your people come, they can wait for us to finish. We are here now." The owner tells her, "This table's booked for 1 p.m. You won't have time to eat." At this time, it's around 12:50-ish. The woman then tells him, "We're paying customers." Now, the dad and the 2 kids are still waiting in front of me, and eventually another cashier comes to the counter and asks them to move so she can serve me. I decide to get a coffee for the road, so I can hear what happens. As I'm ordering, the fight continues between the woman and the owner, and everybody in the cafe's listening. I stand near the takeaway coffee counter, and I keep listening too. As I settle in, a group of 3 people come in. It's a woman in her 30s, and a man and a woman in their 60s, all dressed in alternative clothing. And the 2 women have dreadlocks. They go to the counter, and as it turns out, they are the ones with the reservation. The owner turns, sees them, and recognizes them, and he says, "The people who have this table reserved have arrived. You need to move immediately." At that, the woman looks at the group of people waiting, and she scoffs and says, "You've gotta be effing kidding me. You're throwing us out for people that look like that?" To which the owner says, "Excuse me?" The Karen goes on and says, "Look at them. They probably can't even afford to pay. They're effing hippies." Now at this point, everyone's staring at the woman, especially because this is a vegan cafe, and 85% of the people in the cafe look very similar. The owner goes beet red in the face, and he screams, "Get out of my business now." To which the Karen says, "You would choose nasty, smelly hippies over us?" And that's when the owner says, "That's my wife and my parents you're talking about. Now get out." Hearing that, the Karen's face goes white and her face drops. The entire cafe's watching everything. The woman tries to sputter and says, but... The owner screams, "Out," to which the Karen slowly gets up and walks towards the door. As she's walking out, I hear the owner's mom say, "If you don't want to be around smelly hippies, then I'd recommend effing off to the next town, love." The owner then apologized to everyone for the disturbance, and the wife and parents sat down to eat. Oh my goodness, guys, I would have loved to have seen the look on that woman's face when she found out it was the owner's family she was talking about. And shame on you, Karen, for judging people by the way they look. On this day, there was a woman in line behind me at Panera. She was less than an arm's length away. I then turned around to see if there's a reason why she's 10 inches away from me. I don't see one. There were people, but she didn't have to be so close, and then I turned back around. At this point, the woman gets loud and starts screaming, "Excuse me, am I bothering you? Is there some reason for you to look at me?" To which I say, "Yeah, you're standing very close to me." She then says, "There's people here, and it's crowded." I didn't say a word, I just turned back around, and then she says, "I can cough on you if you'd like." To which I quickly turn around and say, "I can punch you in the face if you'd like." And that's when my husband grabs me and we walked out, and I'm thinking, no, bitch, you're not gonna get TikTok famous at my expense. I'm old. My first instinct isn't to grab my phone, it's to grab your shirt. My husband got me out of there so fast, and I was so mad that I didn't hear the rest of the stuff she was saying. But she immediately went up to the kiosk and starts putting in her order, which means she knows she's wrong, because if she thought she was right, she would have chased me out of the place screaming that I threatened her. See, guys, that's a person who doesn't have the time or patience to deal with Karens. Just shut it down real quick. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the stories today. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/malicious compliance, where a Karen boss refuses to let OP use the bathroom, and she gets taught a lesson that she'll never forget. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.